And good morning, everyone. Once again, all over this spinning planetary object that we all are inhabiting this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. 152 countries we are in tonight, or this morning, if you go to our widget on theothersideofmidnight.com. Click on Radio with Pictures. That takes you to tonight's guest page. Well, in my 5 minutes, as I begin every evening in this program, remember, I used to talk about these things as the other side of midnight is the time between dusk and dawn where the things you pass by, well, as I said the other night, that's becoming blurrier and blurrier. I mean, let's go to item number one in Radio with Pictures tonight. 71 years ago this month, 3 days ago, the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. The first one on Hiroshima, and a few days later, the second one on Nagasaki. There's been a tremendous debate over those decades as to whether that second bomb was necessary. And there are covert groups, pro and con, behind the scenes, arguing that the only reason that that Truman actually went forward and dropped the second bomb before the effects of the first bomb had kind of registered through the Japanese political hierarchy, including the emperor, was because, well, one excuse is it was a totally different kind of bomb. It was the plutonium device as opposed to the uranium device. And they basically wanted to test both technologies, and they had to drop 2 bombs to do that. Of course, 100,000 people died, but, you know, small price to pay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is we as the human species. Now, what I have found out in going back and looking at these historical events using the hyperdimensional model is that for whatever reason, these huge events, they come with an astrological or a hyperdimensional connection. If you look at the alignments, and I don't know whether Greg Aarons has followed me up on this, but look at the times when the bombs were dropped on both those days. Look where the sun was, look where certain constellations are. You see the same ritual pattern, the same Illuminati / Masonic / whatever secret society, you know, take your pick. So the forces that run this world are in fact not overt. For instance, today there was a guy caught climbing up to the 21st floor of the Trump Tower on the outside using suction cups to basically meet Donald Trump at the penthouse. He was billed as an independent researcher who wants to tell Donald something. Interesting. And I'll bet we do ever hear what he wanted to tell him. Because, of course, they took him off to Bellevue, where they're going to give him a psych examination and obviously declare him a total fruitcake, and they'll lock him away in solitary and give him a lobotomy. I'm being a little bit hyper, but you understand, we're never going to hear what he felt was so important. He was willing to risk his life. He's 21, came up from Virginia. Don't even remember who his name is, but if you go to item number 2 in The Other Side of Midnight in Radio with Pictures, the story is there. And, of course, the other day, Donald, called Hillary the founder of ISIS, metonymy, connecting Hillary, ISIS, Hillary, the real ISIS. Today, Donald Trump, in a news item, connected the president as the founder of ISIS. Well, he's not far off there, because if you look at this whole holy triad in the ancient Egyptian cosmology, there was Osiris, there was Isis, and there was little Horus. In this triad, the presidency of the United States is in fact Horus. So, again, Trump is saying things that are profound behind a smokescreen of total idiocy. And it's almost like there's dual messaging going on. And when we get to That Was the Week That Was, which is on Saturday morning, we're going to have some fun because I think I have decoded what he meant by his Second Amendment reference. And it's much more interesting than just a threat to Hillary. Anyway, you're on the other side of midnight. When we come back, we're going astrological because there lies in the key to maybe figuring all of this stuff out. We shall return.
Fight, a little less spark, a little less fight, and a little more spark. Close your mouth and open up your heart and maybe satisfy me, baby. Baby, close your eyes and listen to the music. Dig to the summer breeze.
And we are back.
Tonight, I can show you how to use it.
My guest this morning is David Palmer, who is CEO of something called the Leo King. And no, it's not a competition to Burger or the guys with the golden arches. It's actually an astrological multimedia entertainment tech company, deep breath, that produces original content in house music and occult knowledge, mixing messages of positivity, love, and inspiration. And my gosh, that sounds so much like a commercial. David, come on and tell us who you really are. David Palmer, welcome to The Other Side of Midnight.
Well, thanks for having me, Richard.
I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody, which is, at what point in your growing up, and we all go through that, at what point did you look around and say, good grief, something's really wrong? It's not like they've told me.
21 years old. For me, it was hallucinogenic experiences, to be very honest with you.
So you had a bit of help.
I had a bit of help, and for me...
All right, let me be very honest, full disclosure.
Yeah.
It happened to me. I mean, I was always kind of on the edge looking at things with askance, but the real insight occurred to me when I did ecstasy in a very strange corporate setting in Southern California and had the first fight, apparently, with somebody else on ecstasy ever recorded.
Oh, my gosh.
Because, well, you know, it's supposed to be this lovey-dovey drug and all this, and I have actually psychiatric friends who've used it with immense success in real therapy. I mean, it cuts through so much BS in therapy. But at that time, it was new and experimental, and this was unheard of. And the reason I got into this fight is because the person whose palatial Hollywood home we were all hanging out in and having fun and, you know, taking this and reading this and listening to music and all that, the reason I got into this fight is because I realized on this drug that the person I was, shall we say, commiserating with on some of the early research on the Mars stuff was a total hypocrite. Absolute 1,000% hypocrite. And it was so clear to me. And, you know, there's probably a bit of a Trumpian inclination in all of us. I just had to tell this person what I thought. Needless to say, I was never invited back, but the echoes did ripple through the community, a small community at that time that were looking into this as potential adjunct to therapy, psychological and psychiatric therapy. So I can attest from personal experience that, yeah, there are times when taking something leads to an epiphany where things really become clear.
Yes, they do. And with your experience, I mean, when your heart is open that wide and it sees something or somebody not living in that same space, it's very hard to, even though you want to love them and you want to give them all that positivity, it's hard when you see somebody not in alignment, which I'm all about is alignment. And whether that's astrology, whether that's spirituality, whether that's just even a moment in time, I feel that everything that's out of alignment you can feel the more aware that you become, and the more that it's off, the more that it's not aligned. Or like you said, when was that moment that you felt like it's all off? I don't ever want to feel that feeling ever again, wherever I go in any situation.
What, that kind of, oh my God, look at that? Isn't
Correct.
it amazing how, I love those moments. I have them again and again and again. I still have them, and I don't need, you know, ecstasy to do it, because it's almost like taking that opened doorway either to internal programming or external programming or something, but it was like that was a real milestone. I call them nodal points. And from then on, you know, it was easier and easier to look at things and say, wait a minute, there's something wrong here.
Yeah, I guess I was trying to say, when it's wrong, I can't wait to find what's going to be right. So I agree with what you're saying, because that's what I've based my whole entire brand, my whole life and spiritual work towards, is finding what's really going on, what's really right, what's in alignment. And yes, it is those moments when you feel like, oh my gosh, it's so off and these things aren't right. And there is that door to open, that question, that pondering, that connection with a higher dimensional force that pulls you in, and you just can't deny it.
Is it kind of like maybe remembering, like, oh, that's why I'm in this weird place?
I've always said yes. I agree with you. I've always said it's like a movie, and we just, we keep getting more more entranced in the movie and more connected with, oh, this scene really is coming up. I know this scene. I know why it's here.
Okay, so let's take David Palmer back to those thrilling days of yesteryear, growing up as a kid where?
I grew up in Southern California in Orange County. Classic
Southern California. Beach Boys, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
Yeah,
you're
and
growing up.
Yeah, my grandfather was a avid astronomer, with his telescope, and he had laser discs. And believe it or not, the planets and Gustav Holt was playing everywhere I was with him.
My God, you were immersed in it. So he was actually. Did he build his own telescopes?
Yeah, actually he did, and he also built some of the first computers in warehouses in the late 60s. So he was an accountant who turned mathematician, avid astronomer, all in his retirement. And I just sat there and got to immerse myself in it.
Did he have a book by Ingalls called Amateur Telescope Making?
I wouldn't recall. I was pretty young then, and he does have a lot of books, which I do have in storage with my father, but I would have to go through and look for it.
So you looked through his telescopes, I presume?
Yes, and the first planet that blew my mind was Saturn.
Of course.
And then when I found out what Saturn really means in astrology, I was like, oh my gosh, wow, this is the planet of time.
Okay, right there we have what's called over here a hyperdimensional resonance. I mean, there's a little bit of putting your finger on the scales because your grandfather knew if he showed you Saturn, you'd be hooked.
He did know that.
Wow. Okay, so you're growing up, you get into high school. When did you get the astrology bug?
The girls. Like, why does this girl not work for me? I kind of got rejected a couple times, and I wanted to understand what was going on. And for some reason, I can't describe it. I just always looked at astrology. I heard I was a Leo, and when I read a description of Leo, it just resonated with me. So I started real basic, love astrology.
Yeah, by the way, Robin's a Leo, so I know what it is to live with a Leo, believe me. Okay, so this is really interesting. You turned to astrology to basically get girls.
Basically, and understand, I went through the whole cheerleading squad and was like, oh, well, this
wait. You went through the whole cheerleading squad? You want to explain that?
I asked them all out on a date, then I would find their birthday, and this is back, I was like, 14.
Was this all at once or sequentially?
Oh, it took a while. It took a couple of years.
Okay, so you worked your way through that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I had AOL on dial-up in my bedroom, second phone line, and back then, I was looking at websites for astrology, and what popped up was the Mayan calendar and this date called 2012, and this is back in 1999. I'm like, what is this all about?
Oh, my.
And I was a avid chess player, chess club. I was a nerd. But I also was like the captain of the water polo team. So I'm kind of this weird hybrid of like this really popular like personality kind of more.
So for you, striking out was so anomalous, you had to figure out what went wrong.
Correct. Yeah.
So when you're back engineering, what did you find? What was your first aha in astrology?
My first aha was that, being a Leo, you want to shine bright. You have a lot of inspiration. You have a lot of fun. You always want to be positive. You always want things to be happy. And when things don't go happy or when things don't go right, we don't get it. Us Leos we just don't get it. And we have this kind of feeling like we lose our pride. And so when I really started to realize that my pride was ruling or everything that I do in my life, and how it was affecting even relationships. And there's some girls, they don't like that pride thing. And then there's others that do. So I started connecting more with the ones that did and more.
Well, there's this whole Fonzie thing. Remember, the big attraction of Fonzie, he was bad.
It's true. And so that's kind of how it started for me. And then that 2012, though, that 2012 got me. The Mayan calendar got me. And then I started finding, Jordan Maxwell, and I started really digging into a lot of just like, the underground knowledge, and it was all on really old websites. Like we're talking HTML stuff here, and that got me going. And then next thing you knew, I was experimenting with hallucinogens, LSD, ecstasy, and mushrooms. I had a mushroom experience where I was in a room with all these people, and I was seeing these green reptile figures behind them. And I'm like, I have no idea what it was. I was freaking out. And I used to be really obsessed with a lot of Timothy Leary's like psychiatric reports. I would read them when I was like online, and he had said, take 7 grams of mushrooms to get the real experience. So there I was, 21 years old, like a total like, oh yeah, I can do this. Not prepared to start seeing multidimensional beings behind people. And it scared the crap out of me, I'll be honest with you. And it didn't take me till years later to kind of understand what happened. And that really kind of cracked open the door for me. Then I did LSD, and I started to see that this whole entire world was not what it seemed, and astrology was right in front of me. I started reading charts. I started being obsessed, and then I started being obsessed with time and seeing patterns. Before astrology, I think anybody who's an astrologer is just obsessed with time and patterns, just like how you brought up like the timing of, what went on with the 2 atom bombs that dropped, like how you started the show. Like, I'm really good with connecting with history and seeing like the patterns of every 1,000 years with religious aspects, or I started getting really intense in that sort of way. And then once you connect it with astrology, it's over. You reach this atom bomb within yourself, and it just fuels it, like I'm sure Einstein was fueled for his theories. I mean, you're just obsessed, and you get pulled away, and some other force takes over you.
So in terms of the astrology, in high school, did you actually start casting horoscopes and trying to read these gals' charts to predict which ones would be more compatible and which ones kind of, okay?
It was after. It was after those experiences at 22, 23. It took me a couple years to learn how to cast a chart, to read a chart, to understand. I already knew the astronomy. I already knew, Saturn's, orbit around the sun every 28 and a half years. I knew these math aspects, which you need to know. You need to know the science before you know the spirituality. And I try to say this to a lot of astrologers. There's a lot of people out there trying to be astrologers, and they don't know diddly squat about the science. If you don't know the science, you're not going to be a good astrologer, because it's all about time. It's all about numbers. It's all about knowing the dates. It's all about knowing there's so much to it. And so for me, it was learning the spirituality part of it and connecting it with my science aspect. And so that took a couple years.
Okay. And what's your criteria for success? Because in science, we say, science is nothing if it's not prediction. You have to have very specific predictions. Otherwise, you don't know if your model is right or wrong. In astrology, how do you know? Because a lot of astrologers I know, they do the charts, which are very precise. But then there's the interpretation, which can be as loosey-goosey to encompass the whole North Atlantic if you want.
My way of knowing is that my audience keeps growing and growing, and my number of personal readings has grown to over 3,000 in the last, let's say, 6 years exactly, and that I have the #1 astrology video app in the world, and it just keeps growing, and people are sharing the message so intensely. So for me, it's more of that people are resonating with the message, and that it's growing at a rapid rate, and that I get nothing but thank you mail that I'm helping people through this time, because I believe that the last 4 years have been extremely difficult for anybody who's spiritually open and aware. And I believe that the astrology can prove that, and that I helped assist people through that juncture. And that's, to me, kind of how I look at it, is whether the people are resonating with it or not. It's kind of like a king getting booed or, praised, I guess you could say. I guess the polls are doing pretty well.
Okay, so in terms of your own experience, you started this professionally what year roughly?
2009.
Okay, and we're now in 2016. Over that period of time, which admittedly is not a long period of time, but over that period of time, factoring out the fact that you're getting better, we have to normalize for you got better at this stuff. Have you noticed any changes in the charts of the people you started working with and what's going on now across all people, all charts, all 12 zodiacal signs?
What I can say is that especially, we just had a very powerful transit of 2 planets, Pluto and Uranus.
Okay, you have to define what a transit is for folks.
A transit is basically the planets are moving around the sun, and our view from the Earth is a transit is that planet moving. And so when a transit happens, it could be as simple as, let's say, the moon, right? The moon's transiting through a sign for the next 2.5 days, and then it will transit to the next sign the next 2.5 days. It's basically just the journey of the planets.
Okay, and you have to define signs.
And so the signs basically are these points that we plot in space called constellations, but there's 12 of them that we pay attention to the most because they are based upon the ecliptic. And what the ecliptic is the sun's path. So every day the sun goes on the same path if we look at it from Earth's point of view. And in that pathway, if you were to look behind the sun, there's these same 12 zodiac signs, which are all plotted based upon every 30 degrees. And if you add 30 times 12, you get that 360 degrees, right? Because we're in a circular or spherical motion. So whenever we talk about a transit, we're talking about a planet and how that planet goes through its journey through these 12 signs. And so what we just went through from 2012 to 2015 was Pluto, which some people don't call a planet, but whether you call it a planet or not, that boy is up there, and he is doing things.
Well, that boy happens to be a specifically hyperdimensionally designed ancient alien artifact whose position right now, I think, is not accidental in terms of kind of amping up the physics of the solar system, but we'll get into that later. So you're saying that Pluto, just in the regular astrology charts, is causing a lot of ruckus, and I'm saying there's a reason in this physics for why, and we'll bring that together as we go through this 2 hours. So let me go back to astrology. As I understand it, there are two types. There's geocentric or Earth-centered astrology. Then there's heliocentric, or if you were standing on the sun, astrology. What's the difference, and which one is more relevant to human beings?
Well, geo is going to be much more relevant to human beings because we're on Earth. And this is what most of the science has always been connected with, all the way to Mesopotamia, through Egypt, all the way through the beginning of Christ times in the astrology then. So heliocentric is different. It's newer. We just started really figuring it out. It's more modern, let's say. So it really hasn't gotten a lot of backing behind it yet. But I would say that's more of our spiritual, hyperdimensional consciousness and how to understand that, because that's the sun's position, and the planets don't retrograde in heliocentric. And if you don't know what a retrograde is, we have an anomaly on Earth. When we look up at the planets, it will look like the planet is going backwards when really it's not. It's just us passing the planet, and it's just like if you looked in your rear view mirror and if you pass somebody, it looks like the car's trailing behind you, but really it's not.
Okay, now, one of the bases of astrology, of course, the basis of astrology is this relationship between the planets as they orbit the sun and what they're seen against, the background constellations, the 12 of them in the plane of the Earth's orbit, or, as you appropriately explained it, looking at it from Earth, the track of the sun across the sky every day and night, year after year after year. The fact is that the actual physical relationship of that ecliptic and the various, what's the word I'm looking for, nodal points of the Earth, its spin axis, where its equator crosses its orbit in terms of projecting out onto the celestial sphere, all that has a physical basis. But the astrology that we're dealing with historically is offset by 2 or 3 signs. That's because of this thing called precession. How can you get good predictions out of a system which is in fact based on the wrong mathematics to start with?
Really good question. Because the relationship between the sun and the earth seem to not change. Every March 20th, the sun will reach its exact same point of equal day and equal night. And every September 23rd, the sun will reach its exact position of equal day and equal night. We call those the equinoxes. And then we have the solstices, which are on June 21st and, of course, on December 21st as well. So what you have here is a system that doesn't change. And we base everything off that the sun's relationship to the earth doesn't change. The view might change. So, sure, you might be moving your head up and down, but at the end of the day, you're still in the same spot and you're still looking at the same thing. It's an anomaly. We actually use that precession of the equinox to understand what ages we are in, and that's actually what more of all of astrology going into the past, which we could talk about, really has been used for, is more of understanding the age. But when we look at the fixed position of the sun's path on the ecliptic and the understanding of the signs, like let's take Aries, for example, which is March 20th through April 19th, that is the warrior. That is and when the sun reaches that point on March 20th, guess what it's going to do? 6 months of rising up. It's going to be peaking up in the northern hemisphere. It's going to have its most prominent aspect. This is the promised land, it's called in the Bible. This is when the sun comes and does the Passover, is during the time of the Lamb, right? I mean, really, it all is based upon the sun. And the sun is, whether you talked earlier about Horus and the Egyptian understanding of the sun, or whether we want to talk about Jesus and the understanding of the sun.
I'll tell you what, hold it there. We're at the bottom of the hour. Few-minute break coming up. This is LO, the Electric Light Orchestra, My Blue Sky. Actually, we're talking about stuff way beyond the blue sky tonight. Actually, blue sky is a very appropriate term for what we're talking about. You're on the other side of midnight. My guest this morning, David Palmer. We're discussing astrology, grading into, we'll get there, hyperdimensional astrology, and we shall return. And if this doesn't sound exactly familiar, it's because it's actually written and composed and played by our guest tonight, David Palmer. Let's take a listen. And the name of this is, I'm looking for the name, Melodic. It sounds melodic. So you're a DJ, among other things, and a composer.
Yeah, I connect the heavens actually and do astrology, horoscope, musical mixes twice a week.
I was going to ask you, have you, remember, what's his name? Think of it in a minute. Tycho Brahe and Kepler, the guy, remember Kepler?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Music of the spheres. Have you discovered, like I did, that there's literally music in the patterns of the celestial dance? And if you put it to music, you can actually hear the resonance patterns and the nodes, and you can hear your chart.
You can 100% hear it. I mean, I think music is the rhythm of life, and it's the rhythm of the universe. And if you watch the planets and their patterns, I mean, they have the perfect dance. I always tell people, I'm like, if you could dance like the universe, oh my gosh, you'd be perfect.
Okay, so let's go back to the zodiac and the constellations, because if you use that March date, Aries, the first point of Aries, the beginning of the astrological year, it isn't really Aries that's out there behind that date. It's another constellation because of this precession thing. So is it not true that we've kind of misnamed these constellations, and we're kind of like, how many millennia behind the times? We can correct for it, but really, an Aries is not a goat. An Aries is two constellations over.
Well, that whole precession thing always will come back around, right, to the exact position it will.
Well, if you wait 26,000 years.
Correct. But what it is I was describing when we came just after this break here, or before the break, was what you have to really look at is there is a relationship going on between the sun and the earth that it doesn't matter what the view is. It's the understanding of what we call the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. If you ever look at a map, you'll actually see these things. And as the sun path, the Tropic of Cancer is when the sun is at its peak path for that 6-month period from March 20th until September 23rd. And then
in the Northern Hemisphere.
In the Northern Hemisphere. And then the Capricorn path is going to be, of course, when you see it from December 21st to that March 21st, or that March 20th date. So that never stops, and that always keeps going. And if you look at the understanding of what the ancients put behind all these signs, they based it upon that notion. and that never changes. So
So you do have to do the adjustment when you're doing a chart for the fact that the names of the stuff are 2 constellations over from where the stuff is really going on.
Well, in tropical astrology, we don't actually. I mean, I guess you could say it is like corrected for you.
Well, it's like built-in corrected, but nobody ever talks about it. So I wanted to remember. I'm an astronomer first too, and when I started looking at the connection of the physics that we'd figured out with astrology, I said, "Come on, there's got to be a connection, and it can't be gravity, it can't be electromagnetic, it can't be, nano rays from Robin Williams' planet." It's got to be something that is part of what I'm measuring. And bingo, during the eclipse, we're going to talk about the eclipse later, there was an incredible correlation. So we know there's a physics here. So you're saying that correction is kind of built into every chart in the 21st century, but you guys just don't talk about it because the layman wouldn't even understand it anyway.
It's a lot of research and understanding the signs, and I mean understanding what even the ecliptic is. Anytime you ever saw Carl Sagan, or anytime you see, especially Bill Nye the Science Guy, poor guy never even gave the astrologers gave them to show the evidence. Like, they never got to present any evidence. He just said, "Oh, well, look at the view of the planets now," and that's it. And he just went off that. He didn't even understand that we based it upon the sun's ecliptic path and how powerful that ecliptic path is. I always like to say the sun's the ruler and the planets follow the sun, of course, right? The sun is the one taking us on the journey, and we should follow that position, and we should follow that trajectory, and follow that and understand.
So for people who are born, if they look at the newspaper for the last 50, 100 years, there's been an astrology column in the newspaper. And the simpler ones just basically come off what's called your sun sign, which is where the sun is on the horizon when you're born, right?
Yes.
Okay. But that's only the beginning of primitive sandbox astrology. And most of those horoscopes you read in papers are kind of like mass-produced. Henry Ford. And how applicable to an individual can that mass production possibly be?
It's definitely not it's not very potent, I'd like to say. I would say that it's out of all the planets and all the angles and so forth, I would say I couldn't give an exact calculation, but I would say that, it's a nice little tap of sugar into your tea that you could taste. But it's not going to be the whole entire tea. You're not, it's not going to be what drink you're drinking. It's just a little taste of it. And that's why you have to go much deeper. I mean, number one, we are all unique. So we all have our own unique alignment. And if you understand the planets, I mean, literally every millisecond that goes by, the planetary positions are different. Mm-hmm. They're never the same. Time, for some reason, has this whole unique thing. And I actually take this on a deeper level when I come to astrology. It's like, if you look at our calendar system and our time system, it is off. Like, I think it's funny that, a lot of people try to discredit astrology, yet they're on a calendar system and a time system that doesn't go with the universe, right? I mean, we have a leap year this year, so everything's off already by a day. We already have this thing where we're changing the clock system and time. We're really not perfect, if you understand math, 360 degrees around a spherical universe that we're in, I mean, literally, it should be up to 360, not 365 days. Mm-hmm. I mean, that really doesn't make sense. So already human egoic time system is off. We're not in sync with the universe. And I think that was actually intentionally put. And there's no coincidence that it came right at the death of Christ and the beginning of the Catholic Church. And after Constantine had to switch to the Catholic Church and the Roman entered.
Have you ever heard of something called the Christmas star?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Every year when I was in the planetarium business, we would do a Christmas star show because, according to the New Testament, a star appeared to the Magi, wisdom guys from the East who trekked over to Bethlehem to worship the new Christ and all that. And there's been an awful lot of astronomers who, over the years, decades, have tried to pin down what could this Christmas star referenced in the New Testament actually be. And the most interesting analysis is that it was an astrological configuration of Mars, Jupiter, I think, in Pisces,
Yes.
that was incredibly significant astrologically. It wasn't a big, bright star. It was a symbol. It was a sign in the sky that could be read in terms of the physics as we now understand it. And yet, when you do the calculation, that configuration occurred in 4 BC. In other words, 4 years before Christ is born. And that always bothered me. Well, fast forward the film. We're looking at the Mayan calendar. And it now turns out that those 4 years are actually part of the error in our calendar system, because this is not 2016, according to the astronomical hyperdimensional analysis that I carried out at Chichen Itza. It's really 2012. The big 2012 is coming the end of this year, this winter solstice. So what do you think of that?
I would say that you are one of the most radically genius human beings, and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because I think that you are 100% correct.
I'm suspicious. Nobody's ever 100%, but
well,
so I'm up there.
I mean, if you don't feel it in your body, if you don't feel those goosebumps going, well, then you might, I mean, there's one thing about life, there's a knowing. Sure, there might be the science behind it and all that thing, but there is that backing with it. I mean, the time system is off. It is off, and what you bring up is correct. It is completely off. And I actually have heard of the Christmas star, but I actually thought of it more of just like the understanding of, the star that guided the Magi to Christ, basically. So I had never heard that it was a Christmas star, but I know the whole story, and I knew about that date, and I knew about that heavy conjunction that happened. And it's so interesting that
conjunction is when planets come together in the sky.
In the same spot. Yeah. So it would be extremely bright, especially if you saw Mars or you saw Jupiter.
I don't know whether they were close enough to kind of blur together. I think they were distinct, but they were really amazingly unusual, and that's why in that constellation, because Pisces is supposed to be, quote, Christ's constellation, and you might want to go into some of that.
Yeah, I mean, the Christ constellation is Pisces, of course. They talk about it in the Bible, of course, of ushering the two fish. And if you also look at every Jesus symbol, it's a fish. And we are in the age of Pisces, technically, for this 2,000-year cycle, which technically ends in the 2100s, when with that precession we talked about earlier, that background of the stars right now is off a couple of constellations. We're about to enter into Aquarius now on every March 20th in the next 100 years. So we're getting kind of closer to this whole thing of what we call the changing of ages. We're at what we call a cusp, which I'm sure everybody's probably heard of, whether they had a mom or a brother or a friend that was a cusp baby, whether you're born in between two signs. We're kind of in between two ages right now. And if you look at every 2,000 years as it is, you can see these whatever you want to call ages switch over, whether we look at Christianity switching over from Roman paganism switching over 2,000 years before that into Egyptian, all of the beautiful Egyptian religions. And then you take 2,000 years before that and you go to Babylonia and you come into Mesopotamia. I mean,
okay, David, I hope you're sitting down. I'm going to tell you something that I think might cause ripples in the force and cause you to have to fasten your seatbelt.
I'm ready.
Okay. There are 12 constellations around the zodiac, the ecliptic, the path of the sun as seen from the earth around the sky, or in fact the orbit of the earth around the sun if seen from the sun. And it takes us, according to the precessional cycle, 2160 years, 2,160 years for the earth's precession, which is this nodding of its spin axis, to go backwards and go through a complete 360 circle. So you've got 2160 years for each of those 30-degree signs. You with me so far?
With you.
Okay. The moon, our biggest natural satellite in the solar system, totally disproportionate to any other body orbiting any other planet in the solar system. Isaac Asimov called the Earth-Moon system a double planet system. That moon has been measured and has been described in the literature for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years as 2,160 miles in diameter. 2160 years to go one precessional cycle of one zodiacal constellation. The moon is 2160 miles. Key number here, 2,160. Do you think, David, it's an accident that the moon's diameter expressed in miles is equivalent to the precessional motion through zodiacal constellations expressed in years.
No, I don't think that's a coincidence at all.
Interesting. So who did it? And why are we stuck with it? Because we're talking now about basic fundamental physical relationships between planets in this solar system. How could someone arrange that?
That's what I think based upon what we're kind of entering into, if we want to call this the real 2012 year, I mean, I think human consciousness, with not only the discovery of what Pluto looked like this year, I mean, if you really take it to, we've reached the edge of consciousness. We have reached it to where we come into, the outer, we're going to come out of this little solar system, and our human consciousness, we literally have Voyager flying past. I mean, there's a part of human consciousness, we call it that. What is that called? That edge of space. I forgot what it's called.
The heliosphere.
The heliosphere. We have a part of our human consciousness at this really weird spot that we can't even determine mathematically, if I'm correct from my research, which you would know better, that we don't even know how far that really is or where it is or when it crosses that point, which, how ironic, it passed Pluto. It's at this spot right now. We just got pictures of Pluto. We finally have reached the edge of this human consciousness awareness in this space, and now we're about to go into no man's land. And
hang on, because that also is not accidental. NASA tried for 50 years, from the first missions to other planets, which I was a part of, the Mariner 4 flyby of Mars 50 years ago, actually 51 years ago this year, and the 50th anniversary, literally, David, to within hours, we flew by Pluto with the New Horizons mission. That was not accidental. NASA specifically arranged that. This arcane, scientific, squeaky clean engineering, we can do anything organization, at its deep core, is using astrology and hyperdimensional ritual physics to time getting to Pluto, so there's this huge explosion of public consciousness around Pluto, just as Pluto is doing in astrology what?
Well, Pluto not only just had what we call a square, which is a 90-degree angle to a planet, which is a very difficult and hard angle to another outer planet, Uranus, or Uranus, however you want to call it, which both deal with, in astrology, subconscious aspects of the human body and soul and mind. It is not physical. You cannot see these planets with your eyes. So you are dealing with energy that we can't see physically. The last planet is Saturn. That's why Saturn, quote unquote, rules the reality, right? And
David, we're measuring these energies. The accutron technology is able to measure for the first time these energies. But you're right. To most people, they feel it, they don't see it, and they don't know what they're feeling, so they can't correlate it. And that's where astrology, you guys, come in.
Correct. And that if you've been feeling this really intense edge of the universe and you feel like you're going to fall off, well, that's because we're at that spot.
So is Pluto responsible in the charts, in this model, in this theory, basically for kicking over the traces in the most bizarre election campaign and the most bizarre everything going on right now?
Yes. Well, if you want to get into that, look at the last time Pluto was in this space, 1760 through 1776. What happened at the end of that?
It takes 248 years for Pluto to go around the sun once.
Correct. So we are at the revolution times of the American.
Oh my God!
We're
recapitulating the damn revolution.
Correct.
And the Democrats held their convention literally next to the Founders Hall.
Yeah, they signed the Declaration of Independence.
Yes, and the Constitution.
Yeah, and we are at a time as well, if you want to combine all of the other weird kind of planetary configurations.
That's what we do here.
When you combine, Pluto is in Capricorn. The last time it's been there is in that 248-year cycle.
Capricorn is one of the constellations in the zodiac.
And it deals with government. It deals with structure. It deals with control.
Let me stop you there. As we attribute these things to these signs, how the hell did the ancients know that Capricorn was about government, about governing, about human relations at a political level? How the hell did someone figure that out, and how do we know that's really true?
Well, when you look at Capricorn, the ancients drew it as a goat, and they drew it as actually a mystical goat,
not a
sea goat,
not a scapegoat.
No, but when you ever watch those goats that climb those radical mountains,
yes,
and you can look
Alps.
it up on Google, it's like, how in the heck did they do that thing? They find a way to get up to the top.
We know how they do it.
What?
They have 2 long legs and 2 short legs.
Yeah, but you know what's
kidding?
They will do anything to get there. It doesn't matter how weird the mountain looks or how tall it is. They find a way to get to their objective, right?
Okay.
And the other part is the opposition. So you have to look at the sign that opposes each sign, which is Cancer, which is the crab.
When you say opposes, you mean on the other side of the Earth's orbit, on the other side of the solar system.
Yeah, correct. So 180 degrees on the other side. If you were doing like a duel back in the day, right, with 2 guns, the other person on the other side. So, and on that other side of the zodiac is Cancer, which has to deal with the home, the family, the foundation. The crab likes to stay secure in its shell. It doesn't like to leave much, where the goat will, it doesn't think about water, food. It just thinks about getting to the point. And one thing about Capricorn is it has to deal with structure. It takes reserving your energy, waiting for the right time to make that goat climb the mountain.
Again, I'm fuzzy on how do you understand these attributes of very terrestrial animals and then project them against a pattern of stars on the sky that we've already established are 2 constellations over, so that pattern is not the correct pattern anyway. In other words, how do we get from the quantitative, the numbers, to the qualitative, the meaning, the touchy-feely, this is what this constellation implies and impels and creates the context to further.
So let's look at the planet that rules Capricorn then. And
you have to define what you mean by a planet ruling a star or
star
group.
A planet, let's just take a planet Saturn, for example, has in astrology what we call a rulership, which means it has its own qualities. Basically, it's got its own persona. And let's describe the persona. If you look at Saturn, it is the sharpest of the planets. I mean, if you look at the blades on this thing, it looks like a saw blade in space. And one thing about it is it's razor sharp. It's on point. It doesn't look like it just got out of bed and just brushed its teeth and smoked a bowl of weed or something. This thing looked like it went to the Oscars. It has everything on point. It looks like
again, these are qualitative terms. How do we translate the physics in the qualitative terms so we come out with successful predictions?
Well, I mean, that's the thing that I guess is the magic behind it is. If you look, I mean, it's just basic human. There's something about our human consciousness that can resonate with certain energies. And when you look at Saturn and you look at how on point it is, but if you look at a planet like, let's say, Jupiter, and you see how it's got storms and a big red planet, and it never looks like it looks like it's kind of chaotic in many ways. Jupiter is a big planet. It's the biggest one, and that rules Sagittarius, which Sagittarius is the archer, which is all over the place, and it's a mutable sign, and it deals with, kind of like...
When you say mutable, you mean changeable.
Changeable, correct. So it's like constantly changing, whereas Saturn is a cardinal sign. It's at the beginning of a season. And so it's all about knowing where you're going, being sharp, being on point, having things together. And Saturn also in mythology, because now you have to go back to Greek and Roman mythology to actually even go to where all these things come from.
These attributes, in other words.
Correct. And
so we're basically looking at a compendium of knowledge that extends back in the current historical period several thousand years, and you're saying that astrologers, who were the first astronomers, had a real impetus to study these motions, these movements, and to correlate them with human changes in behavior, and they developed an empirical pattern database, a huge database of observation. And it's been distilled and distilled and distilled, so we are now heirs to some pretty accurate, averaged observations of average people. But again, how do we relate the average to the specific? Because no individual medically is the same as the next individual.
You're correct. But based on their own unique alignment, you can specifically start to see exactly it's time. There's the big watch, I like to call it, which is the universal clock, whether you call that the galactic clock, right? Like the sun's path around the galaxy, that 220 million year cycle, correct? That the sun goes around. You can call that the big galactic clock. And the Mayans focused on that clock the most because they focused on the sun. The sun goes through the same thing the Earth goes through, right? How we've got this thing called the ecliptic, where there's also an ecliptic path of the sun going through the galaxy, and how the sun.
Well, we don't really worry about 240 million years, but they were very concerned, the Mayans, with precession. Now,
correct. Yes.
The current academic crowd don't understand the Mayans knew about precession. They did. Incredibly accurate astronomy. And the accurate astronomy was in service to how the celestial affects human beings, and that connecting glue is astrology. So let's move on to charts, because when I saw some of these charts posted this afternoon, I said, God's sake, David's got to put a little explanation up there, because no one can figure this thing out. Like, we're using my chart as the scapegoat tonight. There's my chart. I see a whole bunch of colored lines. I see a whole bunch of symbols. I see circles within circles. I haven't a clue what it means. And nobody else looking at it knows what it means. How do you derive this chart from the planet Earth going around the sun and viewing planets from it at various positions around the sun?
So you would start with the simple aspect. If you look at the chart, you will see 4 thick lines. There's going to be one that's on the eastern horizon, which would be to the left. It would be the left hard line, which would actually be the eastern horizon. Imagine the chart as if it was Earth, and imagine the top part of the chart, the top 180 degrees, as the surface above Earth. So what we see in our physical view. The bottom part, the 180 degrees below, would be the part that is underneath us that we do not see. We can't see, right? That's like what Australia is seeing, or the other side of the Earth. So when we look at this, you were born at 7:20 a.m. So if you look at the sun is pretty simple to see. It's yellow in your chart, the one we're looking at on radio and pictures. It actually is above the horizon line, which is at Taurus, 29 degrees. If you see the sun there, you were born at sunrise. The sun was up above, and if you see all
God, so I am a Horus.
You are. You know what's interesting? Anybody born with the sun rising, they always say, especially if you look at you're born a Taurus with your rising as Taurus, that means you are unfiltered. You are purebred. You are somebody who feels that you have a higher calling on this planet to do something that feels like there's a higher dimensional purpose pushing you, because the 12th house, which is where your sun is, represents. And I mean, there's so much knowledge here, and I want to keep it kindergarten, but you know, just this alignment alone shows the basics of how we look at things in scientific ways, right? So, I mean, it's pretty clear.
Okay, hold it there. We're at the top of the hour, station break. I think everyone remembers this, the 5th dimension. It's the age of Aquarius. We shall return. And we're back on the other side with my guest this morning, David Palmer, and we're trying to figure out this thing which academics and mainstream scientists look down their noses at. Oh, come on, astrology. And of course, astrology is based on hyperdimensional physics, and we now have quantitative measurements there. And I have felt for many years now that the changing physics, as modulated by the motions of the planets, as attested by an RCA engineer back in the 1950s, who, when RCA was in competition with Western Union, David, they basically wanted to send long-distance telegrams by means of low-frequency radio. And they couldn't because of sunspots. So they hired this amateur astronomer, I forget his name at the moment, we have papers on Enterprise to go and read, and he figured out basically charts, astrological charts, and he discovered there were astrological aspects to when the sunspots came and went. They were connected to the planets Mercury and Venus and Earth and the big outer guys, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. And it was the 1950s, and RCA did not publish. They quietly took this data. They used it in their competition with Western Union, but they never told Western Union how they were getting better signals because Western Union was not using astrology, so they were basically subject to chance, whereas RCA was secretly using this astronomer's data, and they were able to punch their radio signals and their telegrams through the noise because they worked between when the highest periods of sunspot noise affecting radio on Earth would occur. And this is all hidden knowledge that nobody knows, that mainstream, commerce in the United States was based for a time on astrology that worked.
I love it, especially, when those solar flares hit.
Yes.
I have noticed exact planetary alignments happening, and it's usually when it's like, I call it what I've coined the term the Leo King planet energy meter. So every day when I do my video horoscopes, I rate the energy of whether it's going to be low, medium, hot, or extreme based off just a very simple way to describe how intense the energy is. So usually when it's an extreme day, when there's a lot of planetary alignment. So if we look at your chart on your aspect, whenever we'll see like a lot of planets conjunct, like in your case, you've got Mercury and Venus conjunct. You can see it in your chart. You can see the symbol of Venus. It's blue. You can see the symbol of Mercury. It's green, and they're in at 18 and 19 degrees. They were right next to each other when you were born. So, we look at these conjunctions, we look at these powerful aspects, because if you think about it, it's just coincidental math. It's like Mercury, right, takes, 88 days to come around the sun. But you know what? It's so interesting that, Venus will take a lot longer than that. So with Mercury and Venus to actually be in the exact same spot from Earth's view, that doesn't happen every day. That doesn't happen every month. That doesn't happen every week. That doesn't happen every 6 months. It's a very rare mathematical equation. Mm-hmm. So it's a very potent position. And for you, the very simple way to describe that is Mercury, communication, Venus, relationships, projects, and you put your whole life's work into understanding how to communicate with people, figure out the physical reality, because Venus rules the physical reality. It rules, material things. You have an ability to really connect and understand the physical aspects of things, the people, and communicate to people, and your knowledge about, like your own skill sets is amazing. It's like you don't question your skills. Some people, though, you can see if they have like hard aspects to their Venus, they might not be very good at, going to their tool bag of their own skills in their life. They might have difficulty, or not trusting their skills with you.
Hang on. Thank you. It's all interesting. We'll find out how interesting when we come back. We'll be gone for a couple of minutes. Don't you go away. My guest this morning, David Palmer, and he's looking into my chart. We shall return.
I'm gonna give you my heart. Front of the line, straight past the bouncer, looking so fine that the band announced you got your tight jeans on and your hair done right. All your girlfriends say we throwing down tonight. Let me guess.
And to the music of Rascal Flatts, Payback. Payback is we won't go there. Okay, so let's go back to my chart. We're talking about me. My gosh, me. Let's go back to my chart. To me, again, it's kind of Greek. I get it that we're looking at a kind of a fixed celestial pattern at the moment I was born, where all the known planetary objects. How many planetary objects are there on there? Are we counting any asteroids? Are we counting things like Chiron and?
Yes, we especially astrologers today. Chiron's probably one of our biggest things we look at now, especially as the more that we've been figuring out about it since 1971, was it that it was found? So that's rather new in our consciousness. That came out as well. But there's a lot to look at. I mean, we primarily look at the sun and the moon, which I don't call planets because they're not. They're called luminaries in astrology because they're very special points, and they actually are points that create eclipses, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, if we get a second. But then we conclude the other planets: Mars, Venus, Mercury, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and we do include Pluto in astrology as well. There are other asteroids we do: Ceres, Juno, Vesta. And then you could, kind of get deeper into like Pallas if you want. We also have other things that we look at things that are mathematical equations. Like,
okay, let me ask you this question. Up until the invention of the telescope, there were only 5 planets plus sun and moon.
Correct.
Then we developed technology, we see more. These charts obviously have had to evolve as new celestial bodies have been added. Who decides when a celestial body is significant? Because there are 40,000 asteroids. How can you possibly write a program that could predict that? In other words, where is the cutoff? Who made the decision that Chiron is important and Icarus is not?
Well, I think it comes just in the community. Just like scientists all get together and determine whether we should call Pluto a planet or not. We do big conferences every 4 years. It's kind of like the Olympics. And we all get together. And
you meaning the astrological professional community?
Correct. Yeah, the astrological community. You experimented on your own through with people and through your own life. I think a lot of astrologers use their own chart and use the planets and how they're affecting themselves or world events. Like me, I'm a horoscope astrologer, so I look at how they affect the world just as much as individuals. So. I love looking at world events and looking at and seeing how things happen. Or comets, for example. It was interesting. I followed Comet Elenin when it came in. I think at the end of 2011 there, in the beginning of 2012. I followed that comet very intensely. Now, nobody in the astrology community talked about it, but I actually did. I have some videos talking about it, and I was very, very interested in watching on how it made some really interesting passes in between planets because and what events happened at that time. And so, it really is. The problem with it is it's just like the Templars were in Christianity. It's like astrology has been suppressed and it gets thrown away in a bad corner when really, if you actually look at the old Vatican documents, there's proof that they were exonerated. The Templars were not bad, but at the end of the day, the Catholic Church made it look like
they were bad for the paradigm of the Catholic Church at the time. Okay, you raised an interesting point a moment ago. You say you do different stuff. What makes your work different than other astrologers?
That I combine everything. I mean, I'm all about synchronicity. I think that this would be called the art of synchronicity. That everything is interconnected. That everything has a synchronistic pattern behind it. And there's, like you brought up, the 2160 with the moon and with the precession that happens. I mean, I think that...
Isn't that one hell of a, quote, coincidence?
It is, and I think being an astrologer is just like... I hate the term astrology, and I hate being called an astrologer.
Why? Why?
Because what it does is it makes people think that you do written horoscopes in Vanity Fair magazines. It's like, are you kidding? It's like there's so much more going on here, and also...
Well, we're back to Shakespeare. What's in a name? That's why I want to get people more familiar with the concept of hyperdimensional astrology, because in those two words, you marry the physics of how it works with why it should work and why you should pay attention.
I love the term.
You may steal it freely.
I will.
Just mention my name there somewhere.
And so I would love, you brought up a slide of the eclipse that happened on May 20th that you wanted to look at.
You want to go to that now? Okay.
I would love to, because to be honest, let's just finish with your chart and saying this. I proved and showed you that the top 180 degrees of the chart is the daytime and what you can see and where those planets are. The bottom part is where those are. And of course, it would take me months or even years to teach you every single thing. There's so much behind it, but I can tell you that...
Can you send me a memo?
Well, I think we should be friends. I'll call you every night. I'll teach you everything.
Okay, all right, look. Science is nothing if it's not prediction. So this chart basically is me astrologically. How is it useful to tell me what's going to happen in the next 6 months or the next year or whatever?
Because that was your snapshot when you were born. Imagine the universe taking a Polaroid.
Right.
Ching, right when you're born. Now there's...
Oh, my God, the ultimate selfie. Keep going.
The ultimate selfie, correct. And what happens, of course, is when time is changing, and let's say 6 months from now, I see how those configurations are going to align with your chart. It might not look good or it might look really well, right? I mean, it's almost like...
well, let's go for it. What's going to happen to me in the next 6 months?
Well, to be honest with you, looking at your chart, you have been through the hellhole for the last 3 years, and you're coming out of it finally. It's finally relief time for you. If you look at your moon is at 13 degrees of Libra. The planet Pluto has been making a 90-degree square in Capricorn to it for the last 2.5 years. You've had Uranus, the planet of rebellion and radical unpredictability, that's been opposing it for the last 3 years. So whenever your moon's hit, it affects your comfort levels. It affects your, you like peace. You like things to go great. You're a Venus-ruled person because you're a Taurus rising, so you're ruled by Venus, and then you have a Venus-ruled moon. The moon in Libra, or Libra, rules Venus as well.
Hang on a second, hang on. You understand that Taurus is a very strange constellation.
Oh, the Palladian. I know.
No. Beyond the Palladians. In other words, in that, again, going back to the the Egyptian pantheon, Isis, Horus, Osiris. There was also a guy named Set. All right, Horus's brother. Set was the bad guy. Set's constellation is Taurus. I was born with Taurus, Set rising. What the hell does that mean?
I think what it means is, well, you can also look at the fixed stars that are over in that spot, and there's an opposition, but it actually is more in Gemini and Sagittarius of Antares, which is over in, well, it's in Scorpio actually if you look at the constellation now, but back then it was in Sagittarius. You have to kind of look at these fixed stars.
Wait. No. Antares has always been in Scorpio. It doesn't move. It's 1,500 light years away. There's no way it's moved. It's the constellations themselves.
I know, it takes a long time.
Incredible long, much bigger than the history of the current human species. So,
correct.
Back to my chart. What's going to happen? Can you get specific?
I can get very specific.
Please. I'm a guinea pig tonight.
I would say that you're finally about to, in your life, come to a position to where you're feeling much more emotionally free. I think that you have felt like things have been out of balance, that things have been a little bit uncomfortable. I'll be honest with you. I think that you haven't been able to feel your happiness that you have been used to over the last 3 years. I think that you really felt left down. I think relationships let you down very intensely, and you're learning to trust again after having some really failed, difficult relationship issues over the last couple years. And I think you're ready to really start building better partnerships in your life now that are really going to really start to be on your team again, because I think you're rebuilding your team. I think that they're all the right people are coming into your life now. I think the last 3 years kind of made you question whether or not people were really on your team or not, or that they were really helping you out. And you really help a lot of people out. And I think that you didn't feel appreciated enough. And I think the next 6 months is you finally starting to feel the appreciation again. I think the next 6 months is you finally building relationships that actually are going to be there.
Hold on. This is all very nice and very fuzzy, like warm and fuzzy, like cat fur. Can you sharpen it and be a little more specific?
When I do a reading, I do an hour reading, so I'm going to have to pull up the ephemeris, look at all the times and dates if you want all the exact time and dates.
I'm more worried about future as opposed to past. We all live through the past. Can't change the past. I can change the future. What should I be aware of? What should I look out for? What are the pitfalls to the big picture I'm envisioning taking this show and a few other things? And
to be honest, you went through all the pitfalls. You are now in positive time. You are in good times.
Wait, you mean I can just put an automatic pilot like one of Elon Musk's auto-drive cars and just sit and read?
That's why I said that you need to open up to trust now, because the truth is it's already, you're primed. For whatever reason, you went through the last 3 years of your life, and I know you don't like the past, but I think the past teaches us everything. And it's history, right? Well,
hang on. If you don't do something different, they say if you keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, you're nuts.
You're insanity, yeah.
So you need to know, I need to know, what was I doing wrong over the last several years, according to your reading, and what can I learn now to do this right from the projections of the future that you're seeing?
I'm seeing that...
And again, I'm a minuscule test case for everybody else out there with a chart.
I think what this has been is that you're a very unique person and you have a very stubborn way of doing things, and the wrong people didn't know how to understand you. And now people are going to appreciate you, understand you in your life now, and really be there to push you forward. I think you felt restricted over the last 3 years. I think you felt stuck. The energy of feeling stuck is over. This is a time for you to really find the unions, to take all of your visions of your future that you've always wanted, your wishes per se, are all coming true right now. And even though there's a part of you that doesn't believe it, there's PTSD that it might not happen, or that people might fail you, when really that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You are at the greatest point, believe this or not, that I believe in your life, and you have just gone through the other side of hell to get here,
or
and
the other side of midnight.
Yeah, I like that. But I mean, in astrology, I know you want me to.
No. Look, for people who are listening to this
really
and saying,
fast.
"Okay, astrology is this kind of nice thing I read about in the paper, but how could it be relevant?" Using me as a test case, I want you to make something specific we can go back and look at in 6 months or a year, and we can say on the night of August 11th of 2016, David said this, and oh my God, this happened.
Like I said, I would need to pull up if you want to give me a second, I'm going to need to pull up all the what an ephemeris is. It shows where the planet positions are for the next 6 months.
Yep.
So even though I know where most of them are at, if you wanted an exact date, we're going to have to actually go.
Well, you can look. We're dealing with windows, like a week here, week there. We're going to talk about Trump and Hillary and Bernie and Elizabeth Warren in the next few minutes. So this is the kind of thing I'm looking for, because there's a program, and I forget the name of the program. It's run by two guys, one computer expert, and they make these predictions based on sampling of thousands and millions of transmissions through the internet, kind of the flow of the language, the flow of the chatter. And they bring these dates up, as a prediction that this date or these dates are going to be important for so-and-so and so-and-so.
Yes. Which I could run a report for you, but I'm an old school astrologer. I want to run off my own way. I mean, I could run the computer and just give you all these dates.
No. I want you do what you do so well. It sounds like an old song. That voodoo you do so.
To be honest with you, I would say that within the next couple weeks, in 2 weeks, we're about to have Mars and Saturn conjunct. I'm sure you've been watching it just in space every day. When you look outside, you could see Mars right now.
We have stunning air tonight. By the way, Patrick, it's 70 degrees. You're going to have a gorgeous day tomorrow. Low humidity. The sky is amazing here in the land of enchantment. So yes, I've been watching Mars and Saturn kind of get closer and closer. So
right. And so if you look at your chart, your seventh house, which is on the western horizon side, you'll see a 29...
Wait. You just raised a new term. Seventh house? What the heck is a seventh house?
So each house is divided by the understanding, just like the same way that the constellations are every 30 degrees. Mm-hmm. We take from that position of your rising sign and make that as if it were that March 20th date, per se, of Aries, the beginning of your chart, right? So the beginning of your own, I guess you could call it, Earth, and your own clock. And so each house represents each planet's or each sign's understanding. So like the first house is going to deal with Aries because Aries is the first sign. The seventh house is going to deal with Libra because it's the seventh sign over. So the fact that Mars...
By the way, isn't Libra the only non-biological constellation in the zodiac?
Well, because, it's scales.
Yeah.
And
metallic scales used to balance things on. But everything else, Taurus is the bull, Scorpio is the scorpion, Capricorn is the goat, that kind of thing. Libra is really, really weird. What is a non-biological constellation doing in the mix of what the Greeks called the zodiac, the cycle of life? That's where we get the root zoos from. Zodiac, zoos. No, that's why I'm asking.
Because if you understand the signs or even just time, what happens at September 23rd? It becomes the equinox. It is the middle point between the light and the dark, because right after Libra comes Scorpio when the dark hits. And so the balance beam is not biological, because if you think about it, it's the only spot that really kind of counterbalances dark and light. If you think about the sunset,
or it's balancing the physics of the annual cycle of the Earth around the sun.
That's true. Correct. That's true. That's true.
Because there's a reference point I want to get to when we get to the eclipse thing that's going to really, again, blow your mind. I'm going to see whether it's right or wrong according to our model. So please continue.
So Mars and Saturn are conjuncting in your 7th house literally in the next, it's exactly about week and a half, 2 weeks, right? It's about to just happen.
Okay.
And this is going to be in your 7th house of relationships. Now, what's going to happen right after that, or during that time? We're going to have a lunar eclipse. It's actually a prenumeral, so it means it's not exact, but technically we're stepping into the eclipse zone. And actually, we are having in astrology, even though it's prenumeral, there's enough shadow to call it an eclipse. And at the
is this a penumbral eclipse?
Penumbral, yes.
Yeah. When you said prenumeral, I thought we were talking about prediction. No, it's penumbral eclipse is where the moon kind of slides through that fuzzy part of the outer shadow and kind of just gets a little dark, but you don't see those sharp demarcations of shadows and light and dark and all that.
Correct. So that's happening at the same time that Mars and Saturn are going to be making a major conjunction.
And what date is this penumbral eclipse again?
It's on August 18th.
Oh, just next week.
Correct. And at the same time, Mars and Saturn are starting to make their conjunction. So if we look at your chart, I mean, I want to give you stuff.
Hang on. What is a penumbral eclipse in this configuration a positive or negative?
Well, all lunar eclipses have to deal with release and let go, full moons, right? Because it's a full moon. And in the old times, think of the moon cycle like the cycle of a woman's egg. So the new moon that happens every month, right, is when the egg is kind of out of its period zone, right? And we call the period zone, when a woman would be going through her period, would be the dark phase of the moon, which is like the balsamic phase, which is like the day before or the couple days before the new moon. That's a period of new birth and creation. The full moon is kind of when it has come to peakage, and then the energy cannot reach any more higher, right? Like you can't see the moon anymore. I mean, it's at full blaze. I mean, and so when you have
the only place it has to go is down.
Correct. And that's why we call it waxing, building up, and then waning down. It kind of wanes down, but it waxes up, right? So, when you have this huge waxing full moon lunar eclipse happen, you look at those houses and see, oh, this is where the major pop is happening. For you, it's happening in your career house and relationship houses. This would
simultaneously,
which would say that you, in reaching some sort of goal, especially by a new partnership coming into your life, finally is going to start coming together in the next week and a half to 2 weeks, and a new relationship being born that's going to take you and help you and assist you with all of your collaboration as far as what you want to create, what you want to build, what you want to manifest. It's all coming together.
David, you got to hold up your right hand and swear on the Koran or the Bible or whatever, you have not talked to any of my associates about any of the things going on behind the scenes. Do you swear?
I swear on my whole family, my whole family's lives.
Because I got to say, everybody out there, 152 countries listening tonight, he's not far off. There are some fascinating things we're working toward that will affect not just me, but everybody in this listening audience and a lot beyond. And, of course, the big question is it going to work or isn't it going to work? This is kind of a bridge. Is it a bridge too far? According to David, maybe, maybe not. Okay. We are at the bottom of the hour. My guest this morning, David Palmer. We're discussing astrology. And I got to say, pretty cool. Pretty cool. I love predictions that actually make sense. Here's Bad Company, Shooting Star. We'll be back like a shooting star, so don't go away.
Got himself a guitar, used to play every night. Now he's in a rock and roll outfit and everything's alright. Don't you know?
And Earth, Wind, and Fire, Shining Star. Let's hear a bit. Okay, back on the other side of midnight. Only a half hour to go. Much too little time to do all the stuff I want to do, so I guess we're going to have you come back at some point, David. We kind of advertised tonight that we're going to use this technology, astrology, to try to delve into what could happen geopolitically in the next several months, 3 months, the election. So we've got some other charts down there. We've got Trump's chart, we've got Hillary's, we've got Bernie's, we've got Elizabeth Warren's, and we've got Election Day itself. I didn't know you could chart Election Day. Okay, we'll get into that. And then we have something very strange at the bottom, the Last Supper. Why don't we go to the Last Supper first, and you explain to everybody what in the world the Last Supper is doing connected to the seasons. What did Da Vinci know?
Well, Da Vinci was Illuminati, and a lot of people think Illuminati is the people controlling the world when it was much more of an underground scientific, spiritual community that was hiding from the church. But it was so ironic that he got hired by the church to paint the Last Supper. And in many ways, this was also the time when he painted this in the 1500s when astrology had been really taken out. All the cathedrals had all the stained windows of astrology in them until around the edge of that 1300s. Then the Crusades, the Knights Templar kind of got dismantled in the 1314 was the year that it got dismantled. So that 200
Actually,
years,
it was 1313.
Oh, okay. Well, 1314, I guess, first year of it not being around anymore.
Oh, incidentally, I think you have a typo on your graphic. Sagittarius does not have 2 G's.
Oh yeah, and I actually didn't. I found this online, so this isn't me.
Oh, so it's there. Okay.
You're correct. Yeah, this is their issue, not mine. So
anyway,
how
do you connect this Last Supper, Da Vinci's major work, other than the Mona Lisa?
This is so beautiful because if you look at this picture, number one, if you look at, let's just start with Aries. It's the start of the chart. These are the 12 disciples, but they're actually Leonardo da Vinci's ways of describing the 12 signs of the zodiac and understanding the path that the sun goes through. If you look at then Gemini, he's holding up the 2 hands. Gemini in astrology is dualistic. It's the twins. He's holding up 2 hands. You move over, and believe it or not, you will see the 4th disciple is leaning over and hanging on the Virgin Mary, right? Or Mary, and what's interesting is
you mean Mary Magdalene?
Mary Magdalene, and what's in his hand is a knife, the knife to cut open crabs, right? That's what you would use to open up, cut open a crab like shell.
Right.
Then the Leo is right there with his hand on the table, the only one on the whole table with a hand on the table. Leo represents the courage, the strength, the ambition to go, the vitality of life. Then, of course, the Virgo is pretty easy to see as Mary Magdalene, the sun being Jesus in the middle. And then there's the Libra holding the balance beam. See that right next to Jesus with both arms up, literally balance beamed. Then behind that is Judas with his finger up, which is the stinger. And basically, of course, he betrays Jesus. But what's interesting is that Scorpio, right? The Scorpio will sting you.
You've heard the story.
You've heard the story. Then there's the Sagittarius standing up, which Sagittarius rules the teacher, and Jupiter, it's standing up, literally saying, I know everything. You can see him. Then you move over and see Capricorn, which is directing the way, how he's always knowing which path to go. He's the man who looks like he's in charge, knowing which direction to go. Then you see the Aquarian, which is the old man. Aquarius is, Saturn ruled in the old astrology, but it also is ruled.
Well, wait a minute. Aquarius is the water bearer.
Correct. It is the water bearer, but it's ruled by Saturn and it's ruled by Uranus. And what's interesting
See, when you say that a constellation is ruled by a planet, given that the constellations are just random background, the solar system is tilted about 60 degrees to the galaxy. How did someone at some point in time attach Saturn's characteristics to this specific constellation's characteristics, again, knowing that everything is moving and those fixed things are not going to stay fixed? In other words, who made the association and why should we believe it?
Well, we can start with Leo and Cancer right next to each other. The sun ruled by Leo and the moon ruled by Cancer. Then you move out to the next two constellations, which would be Virgo and Gemini. Virgo's next to Leo. Gemini's right next to Cancer. That's Mercury. So watch this, how funny it is. So the sun and the moon are right next to each other, the mother and the father. Then right next to it is Mercury, the best friend of the sun, right? Because it's right next to the sun. Then after that, you go to Libra and you go to Taurus, which is right after, like if you were to look at Gemini, then it would go Taurus. And then if you look after Virgo, you would go into Libra. That's Venus, right? Venus comes after Mercury. Then you would go after that.
Okay. So back to this chart. Yeah. You got to go and read your stuff. Obviously, you have to go to your website. Q website. What is your website? TheLeoKing.com. So there'll be lots more there people can delve into. So let's go back to this Last Supper, because are you the first guy to equate the Last Supper, Da Vinci's classic, with the equinox, with the solstices, with the constellations through the year?
No, I'm not the first one. I think that this has been going on for hundreds of years.
Okay. I'd never seen the association before, so it's news to me.
And then, so of course, the Aquarius, the water bearer, the old man with the wisdom, right? Uranus rules the heavens. It rules epiphanies. It rules the true understanding of the way. So he's kind of this, bearded man. And then the last sign is Pisces, which is holding in his hands, looks like he could hold a fish. And it is the last sign. It is the edge. It is the end of the table. And so it's just interesting because you could see that all the disciples are actually categorized by the seasons. They're all in threes. They're set in threes. They're all clumped up in threes. And I think the most powerful ones are the Virgo as Mary. You can also see the Libra as well.
Okay, let me take a moment here. Someone just tried to call in. We have opened the lines for calls. So if you're on Skype, Enterprise Mission, or The Other Side of Midnight, or 505-796-8802. 505-796-8802 is our phone number, which can be dialed on Skype as well. So if you want to join the conversation, if you have a question of David, I have a million questions. So let's get quickly back to the eclipse thing, because I wanted to show you the actual physics of this stuff. If it weren't for this set of measurements, I would say, like most other people, most scientists say, well, you got to prove it to me. We now have a potential mechanism that actually connects the physics of the stars, the physics of the planets, with what's going on with consciousness here on Earth. And if you scroll down in the Radio with Pictures to that graphic, the one number 7.
Yeah, I've got it up.
Okay, and then you click on it, it makes it really big, and you can scroll back and forth. This is from the May 20th eclipse in 2012, measured here in Albuquerque on top of the Sandia Peak Mountains, which are 12,000, give or take, feet above sea level. And there's a huge block of 70-million-year-old limestone on top, several hundred feet thick. So I put our detector, our little Accutron, which is a Accutron bull of a watch with a little tuning fork. And what you're seeing in the graph is merely a computer charting moment to moment, second to second, each interval is a second, what the rate of the tuning fork vibration is at any moment. And as the eclipse progressed from first contact, which was when the moon kisses the edge of the sun before it slides over it and blocks it totally, from that moment you can see the Accutron went, this is a technical term, nuts. Totally frickin' nuts. That kind of graph should not exist, David. That is impossible by any known science anywhere on this planet, and it is correlated not only with the touching of the moon and the sun optically, but as the moon slid across the sun, the inner layers of the moon interacted with the inner layers of the rotating sun. Remember, these objects are all rotating. And we are able to chart these remarkable changes, these mirror reflections, these resonance nodes, this ringing, harmonic ringing as I call it, with the various phases as two supposedly solid physical objects are passing across each other optically, and the energies they're literally like they're transparent, and they're affecting the inertia of the little tuning fork, changing a physical constant which should be totally impossible. So based on this, To me, astrology is merely a science we have lost touch with over thousands and thousands of years as to how it really used to work. And what you guys are doing is reconstructing a science that is basically been dissed and shattered and looked down upon by mainstream scientists because, well, why? Is it because it works too well? Someone somewhere in the hierarchy of the people that run the planet don't want us to know this is actually a science that actually could work not only in terms of lots of people, nations, but in terms of individuals, in terms of an individual chart.
I think there's a lot of reasons why. And I think I want to say this, that seeing this and also just being an astrologer, it's like we want more scientists help, like to help us, because like, I mean, we're really good at like understanding all this stuff, but we don't know how to plot this stuff because we didn't focus our time on that. Like, this is where unions must come together between spirituality and science. Like, this is where unions must come together, just like this sun and moon did, in such a way, and look at the energy it created. Imagine if the world would come together instead of be so pulled apart in every direction. We're seeing it in politics. We see it in astrology and science. And it's about, and I think that this graph is amazing because what it shows is, especially eclipses, and that's why I brought up with your chart and why the eclipse is so powerful. And then when you start looking at the transits, like we talked about earlier, which are the planetary positions that are happening or coming up during it, when that eclipse happened on May 20th, literally 2 weeks later was the eclipse of Venus, which was the last one that we had in our lifetime, because it takes, I forgot, to
about 122 years for that pattern to repeat again.
So that was in the middle of that period, and that Venus-Sun conjunction that we could physically see, and that also happened at a cusp. That eclipse happened at 0 degrees of Gemini. So it was literally at a cusp, which makes it even more powerful because it's at this.
When you say a cusp, you mean the transition between one constellation and the next one?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have someone who has joined us. Good morning, and sign in, please.
I'm Thomas. Hello, Mr. Hoagland, and hello, Mr. Palmer.
Hello.
I want to pick up on something you said a few moments ago, in which you stated that you'd be back as quick as a shooting star or something like that, with its allusion to astronomy. I think that when Chuck Berry put that into his song lyrics, he was referring to the Lockheed P-80.
Oh, okay.
A fine example of which appears in the opening credits of one of my favorite science fiction films.
But that's kind of an arcane reference. What does it have to do with astrology, the subject of tonight? And where are you calling from?
I don't have to give you any excuses for the reason I'm calling you. If you don't want the call, don't take it.
No, I'm not giving excuses. I'm just asking you where you're calling from.
Well, don't be so rude, don't be so rude.
Am I rude?
You're becoming like another Art Bell, aren't you?
Not exactly.
You should follow the example of Mr. Nouri, who's a gentleman.
Okay, I think we're going to take another call.
Yes, we are. Goodbye.
Oh, my God.
David. Okay, so we're back to basically how do we predict? How do we use that chart? You say there's a lot of interesting stuff up ahead for me, and I can tell you, yes, there's a lot of interesting stuff up ahead for me and through the show, through a lot of other people, etc. Let's go to the charts we've got up tonight. We only got about 15 minutes left. Let's go to the charts we have under Radio with Pictures. We've got 4 charts: Trump, Hillary, Bernie, and Elizabeth Warren. What are the commonalities in each of these charts, given that we know their futures are intertwined, a la the election? But what do you see in the chart?
The funniest correlation is Donald Trump and Elizabeth Warren are cut from the same cloth. They both have the sun and Uranus in the exact same position. Now, they're both Geminis as well, but they both have that sun-Uranian energy, which means they both say things that are way off the cuff. They don't go with tradition. They both have very strong Mars. I call her the barking dog, and I call him the warrior who will never give up. If you look at Donald Trump's chart, he was born on an exact lunar eclipse. Exact.
Oh, that's interesting.
Within the minutes of it, literally. It was happening full. It was full shadow.
Okay, now during an eclipse, think. You got celestially the sun. Then you draw a line from the center of the sun to the center of the earth. All right? Then you keep extending that line, and it either pierces the moon or it comes within a whisker of the center of the moon during a total eclipse of the moon. So you've got a perfect alignment, and that's when Donald came into this realm, right?
It was, and it was exactly opposing the planet Uranus, the moon, and the sun was conjoined with Uranus. So he has a lunar eclipse conjoined Uranus, and if we know the mythology of Uranus, it rules breaking the norms. It rules change. It rules radical change. Radical change.
So you're saying basically that Donald Trump was born to do what he's doing right now.
Correct. And he was also born with Mars on the ascendant, which means Mars was rising in his zodiac, right? So when you have Mars rising, you're a pushy, and it's so funny how he always says, I want to win, I want to win. That's all he thinks about is winning. Mars is all about winning, masculinity, and showing his masculine drive. He also was born with Mars and his rising conjoined the star Regulus, which Regulus is past understanding of Regulus is the royal star. It's over by the constellation of Leo. And so it's this royal mentality. How funny he has all this Trump and gold and you know, like that's just who he is. And we don't have a lot of time, so I want to move on to Hillary. Hillary's the most interesting, I think. Well, actually, I think Donald's the most interesting because he's born on a lunar eclipse. He has all this stuff on the star Regulus. It's very rare to have all that stuff. I mean, it's the anomaly with Donald Trump is overwhelming.
Okay, let's move on. We don't have a lot of time here.
Yeah. So when we go to Hillary's chart, and hold on, I'm getting up to it right now. Okay, so when we go to Hillary's chart, Hillary was born with a conjunction between Mars, Pluto, and Saturn, which are all three what we call the malefics. In astrology, malefic means those planets are harsh, they're intense, and they
Oh my gosh,
dark,
David, look at when she was born. October 26, 1947, 19.47, 19.5. Now that is interesting, as this audience will know. Well, 19.5 is a huge number in the physics. Huge.
I was not aware of that. But what it shows in her chart is she will do anything. She has Mars, Pluto conjunct, and she has Saturn there. It's somebody who will do anything. It doesn't matter what it is to get where she will go.
Okay, let's go on to Bernie. Hang on, we don't have a lot of time. Let's go on to Bernie. I want to save the best for last.
One other thing about her is she's got a lot of Scorpio energy, and Scorpio energy kind of hides everything, right? So she has all these wants and needs, and she will do whatever and hide it all, and it's actually coming out and it's showing now.
Well, that seems to be the pattern of Hillary Clinton's life, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah. Now, if we were to move to Bernie, Bernie's got. I'll be honest, his chart isn't like that amazing. It's kind of like he's just going through an amazing moment in his life right now with Uranus transiting his moon. He has a moon in Aries. He's angry and he's wanting to be a leader, and he feels repressed that his vision has never been done. But the thing about Bernie is he's a Virgo. He's very meticulous and he wants it all to be a certain way, and he's angry. And if it doesn't go that certain way, it doesn't work for him, and he gets really upset. So actually, Bernie's mad. And when they say feel the burn, Bernie's mad. It really is.
Well, the country is mad, except the difference is the Trump followers are mad. It's a mad world. And the Bernie followers are mad, but they're creatively mad, and they're positively mad, and they're determined to do something positive. The Trump followers are determined just to do. I mean, it's like they don't care what they do. They just want to chuck over the system and do something different.
It's true. You know, Bernie is a Virgo, so at least he has some sort of analytical, physical way to make it happen. Trump is an idea because he's a Gemini. It's an idea in everybody's head, but there is no real physical substance to it.
Okay, Elizabeth.
He doesn't have a lot of physical stuff in his chart either. He has like zero, where Bernie's very grounded, and neither does Hillary. Hillary doesn't have any physical energy either. She's just all kind of... I call her the Oz, you know.
So we're talking two huge ideas clashing against each other, big archetypes as opposed to grounded how to make stuff happen?
Correct.
And
okay. Unfortunately, we've got Donald and we've got Hillary, and both don't have that physical way. They both are great Oz machines. Donald has more of an idea, and
when you say Oz, you mean the guy behind the curtain.
Correct. And Hillary is more of a projection of how she wants you to see it instead of it really being anything.
So they're super spin doctors, both of them.
Oh, they're both masters.
Okay, let's get to Elizabeth.
And then Elizabeth Warren she is really good at just barking all of these really radical things that nobody else has the balls to say. She's actually, she's a man underneath there. I'm going to be honest. She's a man, baby. I don't know if you ever watched Austin Powers, but she's a man, baby. But there's this masculine side to her, and she will say whatever it is that nobody's willing to say.
So when was she born? I don't see that data at the top.
Oh, I was unable to use that chart, but her birth date is. Hold on.
Piece of data, yes.
It's June 22nd, 1949.
Okay. Again, still within the 19.5. Fascinating. Okay, let's go to the election chart. Number 5 in Radio with Pictures under David's items tonight.
And I am pulling it up right now. Now, the election is very interesting because the moon will switch signs that day. It's going to move from Aquarius, and then it's going to move into Pisces. Both Aquarius and Pisces rule for Donald Trump, it rules the career house Pisces. Okay, for all Geminis, it does. So at the end of the day, the moon will be in Pisces, where all these planets in Pisces are. Neptune's in Pisces, the south node of the moon will be in Pisces, the Chiron will be in Pisces. So there's a heavy load of career and stuff for Donald Trump. For Hillary, it's a lot of stuff in much more of kind of just a funhouse energy. It's a weird day because the moon's going to switch signs, and it switches signs exactly at about 1 p.m. Pacific, which means a lot of the voting will be done on the East Coast early. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting, because it's earlier, but any of those later voters on the East Coast past 3 p.m. voting will change a lot. A lot of people will change their minds at the last second. And I think you're going to see the media is going to be telling us, oh, we've got it all figured out. It looks like this, but I think it's going to switch so fast. And I think there's going to be a deception, because if you look at the south node of the moon and Neptune, that only happens if you understand the south node of the moon moves every 18 years to go through an energy. That's why we have eclipses every 9 years in certain areas, right? So
right.
The fact that Neptune is exactly on the south node of the moon at the exact time, which Neptune rules deception, it rules deception of the media. We are going to have the moon conjuncting this point. I believe we could run into a massive deception where everybody knows something's going on, and maybe the whole election gets put on hold to figure it out.
Oh my God, you're talking major paradigm.
It's paranoia, because Pisces rules paranoia.
Paranoia. Okay, so back to each of their separate charts. What do you see that's convergent? We know that November 8th is a crucial date. We know these 4 people are involved. Do their charts reflect their intersection?
Yes.
How?
If we look at that, first of all, it's in November 8th, so it's after Hillary's birthday. So the sun is going to be in her sign, per se, on that day, and Mercury will be in her sign as well. So, there's some good energy for her in that aspect. But Donald, on the other hand, he's got Saturn going to be in the position close by to where his eclipse was when he was born, which Saturn rules achievement, and it rules, getting what you want, basically, by the way the goat gets up the mountain, and Saturn is not a good position for Scorpios, because it's not in the view of that sign. It's only 30 degrees over, so it's almost in the blind spot, right? And so I don't want to be predicting on air, because I still haven't come out on my own site, on my own app, of who I think is going to win. Mm-hmm. But I do.
We only have a couple of minutes. Do you see anything regarding Hillary taking a sudden vacation because of her health?
Oh, that's
a rumor out there.
I actually thought that it would be Donald Trump that would maybe be going through more of that. Because he's got Saturn getting ready to come onto his moon, which is very emotionally difficult. But she's going to be having Saturn square her moon. It's funny that both of them are gonna come into, I would say, health problems near election at the same time.
Interesting. Well, look, we only got about a minute left. David, this has been fascinating. Obviously, the first of many episodes, because as we move through this period, I want you to, you've got my phone, you got my email, I want you to give me heads up if something interesting can be seen so that we can, we basically can figure out what's going to happen before it happens.
I want to say this, September 1st, September 16th, that these two eclipses that are coming are radical. They're in the middle of so many planetary configurations. They're overwhelming. So this next 4-week cycle is the most you have seen ever, and I think it is the beginning of what you talked about earlier with the 2012, 2016, really this being 2012. This would be the beginning of that door entry. And if you follow Terence McKenna and understanding the understanding of time wave zero and and how time compounds on itself, September would be when time is about to compound over the last, I forgot his exact...
Oh, my God. We're coming to the end of the show. Our music's playing. David, we got to have you back. Basically, you're saying fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be one heck of a bumpy flight.
It starts September 1st, yeah.
Well, remember, everyone, third star on the left, straight on till morning. See you tomorrow. Good night, everyone.